Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we're just going to cover a couple of tips and tricks about handling a massive MDF job that we just finished that incorporated about 100 sheets of 1/4 inch MDF. A couple of times a year we get a massive job from one of our customers, and this year was absolutely no different. We actually got a couple of extra big jobs, one of which I just finished up here in the shop. So the shop is a complete mess, and it's been like that for about 2 weeks, but I'm slowly picking stuff up and organizing things after that production run. The production one is actually a good size. It was 100 full sheets of 1/4 inch MDF. Now a full sheet is 4 by 8 feet. If you're into meters, that would be what? 1.2 meter by 2.4 meters. Full sheet 1/4 inch would be 6 millimeters thick. So for that production job, we're cutting a whole bunch of shapes and different sort of, basically just shapes for a customer to use at their end for their production cycle. Now, some things to keep in mind when you have such a large production run. Number one is being able to identify everything that you're actually cutting. Because the worst thing you need is to literally have about 10,000 shapes everywhere, and they all look sort of similar and you don't know which is which. Now we have a full sheet CNC router. We could have also done the job with our laser. Waterjet was out just because we're cutting MDF. MDF and water and sand don't really make it for a good mix. So if it was stainless steel, absolutely the waterjet. It just happens for this, the most efficient way of cutting it was with our full sheet CNC router. When it comes to identifying pieces, this was a very large production run, so we had to make sure everything was totally accurate, and that I actually ended up counting everything about 5 times and cross-referencing with a data sheet just to make sure that every piece was available, because the last thing you want to do is ship something to the customer and then they're missing one piece and sort of slows everything right down because it just happens to be the most important piece of the whole production cycle. Now with the CNC router, initially what I thought about doing was actually CNC routering the code right into the sheet so that when you have the shape in front of you, you have the code right there and it will never come off. I decided against doing that just because at the end of the day, the customer is paying for CNC routering time, and that extra time didn't really give any real benefit. Something far more efficient would be just to use a magic marker, which is what I used, and just manually just write it down as I'm doing the production. Now, if I was going to do it, I could have also just sort of did a light pass and that kind of stuff, but again, the more I use my machine, the more expensive the overall project is. So you got to be very efficient. Always use sharp bits. I went through 3 different bits for this project here, not because I had to. I could have just done the whole thing with 1 bit, and at the end of the day it would have been very dull. I just wanted to keep everything going smoothly without any problems, because sometimes what happens when you have a bit that's a bit dull, the edges come a little rough. Other things that can sort of happen, you could pick up a piece and throw it across the shop too. So you got to be careful about how you sort of organize things and how you sort of package things at the end of the day for the customer to receive efficiently. last year around this time, I also had a massive MDF job. In that case there, it was 3 millimeters or 1/8 inch thick, and the design needed sharp inner corners, which is something that you just can't do with a CNC router. So I did the whole job with the laser, and that was literally a full container full of just sheets of MDF over and over again, cutting different designs and motifs. I did not do any videos of that one because what I was cutting, everybody would recognize right away. And you know, we got to keep our relationships on the up and up with our customers. Another massive MDF job I did about 2 years ago, or actually 3 years ago, in my old shop was actually laser engraving designs onto pieces of MDF they were going to use for a construction project. And that project there, I believe, we had, again, a full container full of cut MDF. In that case there, it was actually 1/2 inch thick. So it was really thick stuff. And we did, again, that whole project with the laser. So each machine has a plus and a minus. The problem with the laser is that the thicker the material becomes, the longer it takes to cut, and the more expensive the overall project becomes. We also have a limitation regarding size. We could technically feed roughly a full sheet into the laser to cut it out, or we just lay it straight on here and cut the whole thing out. The speed of the CNC router is just amazing, and if, let's say we go from 1/8 to something a little bit thicker, the laser will go exponentially slower. While with the CNC router, as long as they have a sharp bit, the difference in cutting speed is nominal to almost non-existent. Now, there are some other issues that you have to contend with because you go through your bit a lot faster. Getting the sheets on and off the table take a lot longer. And for that, I had to use a lot of leverage because I'm only one guy in the shop. And you know, when you have 1 inch thick MDF, that's really backbreaking work. And we have a lot of sheets like that, even if they're 1/4 inch. Just the buildup of going back and forth takes quite a bit of time. So there's a lot of issues to contend with production cycles. Now, just about all of my biggest projects I've ever done at CNCKing.com have been actually MDF, whether that's 1 inch thick, 1/2 inch thick, 1/4 inch, or 1/8. It's a very popular material, and there's a few reasons for that. Number one, it paints extremely well. And let's say you have a piece of plywood and you have a piece of MDF. The plywood, you need to do a couple passes with the paintbrush. MDF just sucks it right in and it works perfectly. The other advantage is the cost. MDF is incredibly cheap relative to just about every other material out there, especially when you have a full sheet of material and you have skids coming into the shop that you have to do the production with. Another nice thing about MDF is that it's a very biodegradable product. So you're not stuck with a whole bunch of material that is toxic or radioactive or what have you. Some of the things with MDF that you could do is that it's very strong, but it can also be very brittle. So when we're working with our customer to design projects using MDF specifically, I use quite a bit of my experience in the background to try to make sure that everything that we cut stays together, and when it ships over to the customer, nothing breaks. So with this project here, I believe the shipment was almost 2,000 pounds of MDF shipping by freight. Freight is a very incredibly cost-effective way of shipping stuff across North America, and it's something we use quite a bit of here in the shop. Now, I'll give you an example. USPS.gov, so the American shipping company, it's the same with the Canadian one. If you're shipping roughly 50 pounds of stuff, you're probably paying a couple $100, slow speed, if they take it at all. This project here, the weight was an issue, and definitely the size. We were basically cutting 2 to 3 pieces per full sheet. So those things were massive pieces. And when I organized everything in the skid for the customer, I made sure that every section that they were working with was the next one coming up off the skid. So there's no point having 1,000 pieces or 10,000 pieces and everything's a jumbled mess, and then you take it apart and figure out what goes where. You just got to be very conscientious at the other end when the customer gets it, that they know exactly what is where and how they're going to get it. So if you're looking for custom MDF jobs, contact me at CNCKing.com. And of course, we do stuff with other materials. Any spec you have, we can do it for you.